Okay, so this is my Barn Star Christmas light project. And the whole idea here is that I wanted to take a Barn Star and convert it into a Christmas light. You know, there are lots of standard holiday symbols or motifs, you know, the snowflake, Christmas trees, all kinds of stuff, including stars. And so you see these barn stars on the gable end of a barn. And, you know, some people think it wards off evil spirits. Others think that it, you know, gives you good luck in terms of your crops. I believe the Dutch are kind of behind it a little bit. You can look it up yourself if you want to find out more details. But a lot of times people just use the barn star just as decoration, which is what I'm doing, but I'm just enhancing it for the holidays. And so I've made different types of stars in the past out of wood. And I even at one point had this as a star. A little bit of a different setup where I had one of these carnival lights in the middle and did various other things with it. I'm going to put the carnival light, the white carnival light, back in the middle of this one. But what I've done here is I found a string of twinkle lights, and it has the controller so that you can make them, you know, chase and flash and all that stuff. It's basically a 2-channel light controller, and it's rated for outdoor. And so what I did was I drilled holes throughout the star. There's 100 little mini LED light bulbs on that strand, 5 arms, that's 20 holes per arm. I did sort of fudge it to where there's like a few more holes this way as opposed to this way, because you end up with a kind of a concentration towards the middle. And I'll have a backing board. This will screw, I've got some mounting holes in here as well. And each arm will have one screw that screws into a post on that backing board that, you know, it's just like back behind here. I will also have, I don't want to forget about this, I also will have regular screw-in C7 light, actually. I'm talking about the traditional kinds of holiday lights that you see people put on their house that are not twinkle lights. And they're, you know, each bulb typically screws in and unscrews on its own. And you see C9s at a lot of the bigger, like, commercial applications. But for residential, you usually see a C7, and that's what I'm using. And so in this case, it'll just be like the socket will be laid sideways back behind this. And then right here, I will screw in a light bulb. And then each socket, including this carnival light bulb in the middle, it will have its own wire that goes all the way back to the controller, so I can have a little bit more control over how I wire it. I can hook them all together, or I can have each one on its own channel, so I can put it on a chase controller and make it, you know, chase, which gives it a flashing look. Or you can even just put all 5 of these together and have them chase on and off at the same time. You just have a lot of versatility when you wire it so that you take the power all the way back to the source, you know, like your timer, and then you can put it on a chase controller if you want to. But so the idea here is that I drilled this from behind, and then I used this screwdriver that I have, which I kind of sharpened, and then after I drilled pilot holes, then I poked through and twisted and whatnot. And what that did was it made these holes, they kind of open up a little bit, right? They just like opened up. The screwdriver that I found is just about the same diameter as these LED lights. And so once you take these and you poke them through, and then I'm going to first put a little bit of silicone in there and then push that in. And then that should, see right there, that's kind of pinched into place as it is. And then with a little bit of silicone in there, then that should hold it in place pretty well, and it also kind of waterproofs it and keeps moisture from coming through those holes. And so, and then the idea is once you get, you know, all of them all set, then you can take that controller and you can make it do various different chase patterns. And then in addition to that, you have these other bulbs like this carnival light here in the middle and the other C7s on the tips that you can do other things with just based on what I already said, you know, different, have them all on or have them chase or whatever. And the whole idea is to make a star that kind of shimmers and flashes, kind of like a shimmering star. That's the whole point of this, is a kind of an animated holiday lighting star. Okay, so what we have here is the backing, so that barn star sits on top. And I'll draw your attention first of all to these 5 posts that stick up. And that's where I mentioned that I'm going to screw the barn star down in, and they will screw onto these posts. This was the least successful part of this design. I should have spent more time making these more sturdy and more at the proper angle to really fit up inside that arm to where it really fit there tightly. But I kind of roughed it, and it doesn't go together very well, but it will hold well enough for this year. And what I'll do is, when I have more time, I'll redo that next year and do a proper job of it. The thing is, we're already into early November, and I want to get this stuff done here and installed before Thanksgiving and before it gets too cold. And so I'm just going to move forward. I know it'll hold for now. I'll fix it in the off season. The other thing you'll notice is I've got these smaller little poles. And what I was going to do, I was going to take some more of those twinkle lights, a whole nother strand of those twinkle lights, and just sort of wrap it around here to have some backlighting. The other thing I should point out is that barn star sort of sits up off the back of this, to where there's like a gap around the side here. So where that barn star is only so big, this backing is just a little bigger, so that you actually see the edge of this all around the barn star, you know, extending out from behind. And so the idea was, if I put some lights back behind here, it would spill out sort of off to the side, back behind the barn star, and just give it another, almost a 3-dimensional look. The barn star itself already is somewhat 3-dimensional. You know, it's not flat. It's, you know, angled up on the arms there. But you know, so I tried it, and it looked a little bit too bulky with all those lights in there, and also it looked like it was maybe too much light. So I thought, well, I'm just not going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these off, remove these, and effect a little bit of a repair as well. So the other thing you notice here is the C7 bulbs on each tip. We talked about that when the barn star goes on top. Each socket here is going to be behind the metal of the barn star, but then the bulb will be extending past, so that the very tips of the barn star will look like it's all light, because it's a light bulb that's, you know, sort of extending out beyond there. And then I drilled these little holes here, and then the power cord for that bulb extends through. These have been set in place into silicone, and a couple of them I didn't do a good enough job, so I'm going to redo that. Basically just going to put some silicone in there, put some weight on it, and push it down in to hold it into place. And then once the barn star goes on top, the barn star is going to be pushing down on it as well. And so I got those all set. You can see I have a weight holding it together. Okay, so what I have here is I have removed the post, did some wood filler, some rough sanding. I will then be painting this shortly. I have discovered that the silicone holding these light bulb sockets in just isn't really doing the trick. So instead I drilled 2 holes on either side, just big enough, you know, just little round holes, just big enough for this little wire. This is like baling wire, but it's not as dirty. It's cleaner. It's got looks like it's got maybe some tin or something in it, so that it's hopefully will not corrode and rust as much as baling wire does. But I just poked it in from behind, twisted it, and now it is locked down pretty darn solid. I might build another fixture next year where I do some more involved front and back lighting. But that's what we're going to go with this year. So like I said, next step for this is to get it painted, and then get the other piece, the top piece, the barn star itself, get that finished up and mounted on top, and then we're ready to test it out. Okay, so here we have the barn star. You can see, first of all, I did make this little fixture here, just a piece of plywood and a dowel, so that I can turn this upside down, and it gives me a kind of a good, I don't know, position for this barn star to work with. The thing is, when you're poking these through from the backside, if it then tilts and comes in contact with the table, it kind of pushes them back out. But that leads to a whole nother problem that I've got, which is, even though this is basically working, it's just not as solid as I want it to be. And I feel like the real problem is that these holes are barely not quite big enough. You see, these tips here are somewhat tapered. This is what you might think the light bulb looks like, where the black represents the socket and the yellow with the diagonal stripes represents the actual bulb. I mean, in the case of an LED light, the bulb is actually just a piece of some kind of plastic. And so, you know, when I'm pushing these through the hole, I don't have a straight side. They're not parallel to each other. And I use the word taper, but really it's more like it's stair-stepped. So it's not actually, you know, tapering like this, but it does go from small to big. And the holes that I originally built were only big enough for the top part to fit through. And so by making it bigger, I can, you know, go a little bit further down so that, you know, instead of the star being about there, now the star is going to land somewhere in here, and I just have, you know, more of it. When it's only in this far, there's a big bulk of it plus all the wire kind of pulling on it, and it's not going to hold as well. But if you can get all the way down here, you have a larger bulk of it through the hole, and it's just going to be more stable. So unfortunately, what I'm going to have to figure out now is to get maybe another screwdriver like I did last time, but it's bigger. Maybe sharpen the tips and then poke it through from behind so I can make just a slightly bigger hole. And the whole idea here is now I can push this up further and hopefully get a more stable, you know, sort of connection or solid mounting of the bulb. So I'm going to pull these out. They pull out pretty easy. The silicone pops right off of it, and just kind of take it from there, see what I can do. Okay, so the other thing I'm going to do with this little wire system that I have, again, it's poked in from the back. It's a whole loop poked in, twisted, and I got these two pieces coming backwards. I'm actually going to take those two pieces and point them downwards towards the base of the socket and then hammer them into the wood. And I've found with the other tips, when I've done this, it held it in pretty solid. I mean, it's already pretty solid, but it just gives you a whole nother level of this is in here very solidly. First, I'm just going to kind of flatten it on the top there, but then sometimes it helps to get the ball part of the ball peen hammer in there. And again, flatten out the top here. You know, you might be afraid that if you hammered too much you might break it, but you got to hammer it pretty hard to break it. But that really helps lock it in. And also I don't have a couple of weird wires just hanging out here poking around. I mean, if they were just sticking up, then when I put the top on, remember there's a bunch of wire on the underneath side of the top, and it could get hooked in there if I ever try to take the top off. You know, maybe some of the wires will get caught up in there. So I'm going to get rid of them anyhow. And now the next thing I'm going to do is to poke all these wires in through the hole to take them around the back for wiring up to the power source. And then I'll just staple these down here real quick. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take my drill with a nice little Forstner bit. And that Forstner bit is about the same diameter, actually slightly less diameter than the threading on this little bolt here. And this is just a felt pad. This actually came with my my bed, the adjustable base on my bed, and I didn't need these. And I put this piece of wood on here to thicken it because I had a lot of travel space with these threads, and I didn't want to just get a few threads into this wood here because this wood is only so thick. And so I just cut these pieces of wood, glued them in, painted them. So now I have this total thickness here is, you know, enough to take most of these threads. I wanted to show you what I meant by keeping the back of the star off of the house. So here's, you know, the star, equal sign. This is a side view, so we're just taking that star and turning it sideways, blowing it up to look at it. And then the little blue squiggly lines, that's my siding. I actually have the lapboard type siding. And so the idea is that, you know, if I didn't have the red, by the way, the red represents the little feet. And then if I didn't have the little feet, then all of this wood on the back would just be rubbing up against my siding. And, you know, with these little feet with the actual felt on the back of it, you know, they'll just land here on the wood and help protect from, you know, scuffing the wood. And I'm just shooting for kind of the rough center. Just doing a little bit at a time. I've got a pretty good sense of how deep I can go without busting through the other side. And that's it. Then I'm just kind of putting pressure with my thumb here, right in the middle. And as I turn this, it just cuts right into that wood. It's a kind of a softer wood. And sort of like self-threading into it. And yeah, very nice. Okay, so what I have here is some SPT2. So I'm just wanting to show you the difference between the SPT1 and SPT2 cable, where the black ring represents the actual metal wire, which the way I drew it makes it look like it's a solid strand, but of course it's a, you know, multiple strands that are twisted together so that it's flexible. But it's the same diameter, which is 18 gauge. But then the red ring represents the, you know, the plastic jacket, they call it, that's on the outside. And the, you know, the SPT2 is just bigger, you know, and it's just, to me, it's like it's more durable and really, I think, easier to handle, because it's, either one of them is pretty small. So when it gets even smaller, it's just even harder to handle. And so anyhow, just wanted to illustrate the difference between the two. They both are going to carry the same amount of current, which in the case of LED, I mean, this is 18 gauge. I mean, gosh, you could probably use a 30 or a 40 gauge for most of this LED stuff. They hardly draw any current at all. You'd have to make the calculations to know for sure. And so all I'm going to do is just, you know, trim it back here, and I'm going to make some butt joints. I've already got these bundled together with some tie wraps. And what I did is I bought a 50-foot spool of this stuff, and then I cut it every 50 feet. So that ended up with, you know, 5-channel, 50-foot wire. And of course, it's always very important to seal these electrical junctions with the liquid nail. At least it is for me. I think this just gives another level of, you know, security, you know, certainty that I will not have water getting into this electrical connection and messed it up. You know, it'll corrode it, possibly, but also it will maybe short out. And just a quick little explanation, where the black represents the star laying down on a table, let's say, and then the little dashed line actually represents the little PVC pipe I have, just a short length of PVC pipe. Of course, that's hollow, and that's what allows me to pass this wire. The red is the carnival light and the wire with the plug. And so this will just sort of sit down in here, allowing to pass the wire through. And then right in here, I just put a little bit of silicone around the edge there. Drop that down. I carefully balance some weight on it, just let it sit overnight. and I've done it like that before, and it holds very well. And then later I'll pass this through the backing. I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so now what I've got is, just on the top part, again, it's the barn star. This time I show the those little dots are the, the twinkle lights. But, and then you see the carnival light, and then there's the plug for it. So plug already kind of goes down through the PVC. That's all mounted. But now we're going through the backing board, represented here by the big rectangle. But the red here in the middle, that's the hole in the middle of that board. And so what'll happen is, this plug passes through, but then we also have the wire and a little bit bigger controller, and then a plug that has to pass through here. But this hole's big enough for both of them to pass through. And then again, I drop that down, and again, on every arm there's one hole each that'll line up with a little, a little pole here, as I showed you earlier. And then you just kind of carefully screw that in, and that pulls it all together. Okay, I'm just kind of going handheld using the onboard mic here, but it's put together. Everything's functioning proper. I know I don't have the twinkle lights on, but I have high confidence in those. Basically, it's all working, and now I'm going to mount it to the house, and then later this evening I will turn it all on and see how it looks.